Right.
We've already got a couple from Emma here.
All right. And then just let me know when we're ready and I'll start.
We're ready.
All right, terrific. All right, so we're looking at your administration settings. When we did the configuration, we've already gone through uh, what's called global administrative settings, but that was a brief overview. So there's a few things that I typically like to go through. And in the interest of time, so that we can complete this in the time I have allotted this morning, I'm going to go through it very quick. Now, fortunately, I'm recording this, so you'll be able to refer back to it. And let's see here. Hopefully, we've got the appropriate rights. Great, Glenn. So you've got Project Center administration rights.
Yep.
And so we'll go into Project Center administration because I'm just going to look at a couple of settings there before we go to project administration. So Project Center administration is the global administration, and we've got your projects here. We have a project template, and we're actually going to look at that template because that's where your standard settings should reside. So we'll use that template. And then I want to look at your servers because I just want to check a few best practice settings to make sure we're on the same page. So in your Project Center server, I come in. Now your backup, you should already have been advised regarding that. That points your backup to that location. Now I'm trying to remember. Do you currently have more than one office?
We do. We've got Brisbane and Bundaberg.
Okay.
About 3 offices.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So with this backup, that do you know? Do we have IT on the line? Out of curiosity.
Yeah. Chris is here. Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, hi, Chris. So are you pointing that to a location where you're backing this up?
every single VM that I have here is backed up nightly. So
Okay, because this
So when you say backup, we do global backups ourselves. Is this another internal new form of data backup?
yeah, this is important to back that particular location up because that's all the data that's in the project database and as well as the indexing. So in the event of a server failure, it's necessary to have that. And
yeah, we definitely do have that mark, so it's all good. We can move on.
all right, excellent. All right, RMA engineering, Toowoomba, that's great. Both administrators and list settings, good. Semi-weekly, weekly. External reminders, I'm going to switch that. Oh, no, weekly is fine. That's correct. Semi-weekly, correct. 2 megabytes, correct. Okay, sorry. All right, no changes on forms at this point. Okay, no synchronization on that. MSG. And I'm just going to look how many we have designated. So let's see. Okay, good. There's your global admins. So Tony, Morgan, Justin, Glenn, and Chris. All right, and then security. Great, we've turned that to RMA employees. I almost feel like I've been in here. It looks like it's got all my settings that I typically make sure you have. All right, over to projects then. So either we've been through this or Dominic and I have gotten you on the same page, it looks like. All right, so now...
No, you showed me how to batch create some
Ah,
projects.
all
And
right. So then when we went through, we did look at those. All right. All right. So now on to our project settings. So then we probably actually looked at a number of those settings um, as well. So I'm kind of thinking we're probably on the same page here as well. So now project settings. So on each project, you can have any number of administrators set for that project. So any global administrator. So in that licensing, I just showed you who the global administrators were. I filtered down to what those 5 individuals, okay, plus the NPC admin account. All right, they're global, what's called global administrators, and they have access to this panel. But now for each project, we can allow someone like a project manager to come in and access those projects and make changes to them. So every project in the office has its own settings. And if I open up that template, so I'll say edit settings, we use this template to actually batch create or even create one single project from that template, just so that we have consistency on the settings, because there's a lot of customization options that are available. So I'm going to open up that template, and using this as an example, the template has all of the same settings that exist in a project. So a project setting looks just the same as this. Okay, there's really no difference in the way it appears. You put in what the project name is, what the project number is, what the description of the project is, who the project manager or principal are, what the roles of the different participants on the project are, etc. And then we go through the settings. And I want to make sure everyone's familiar with what these settings are. So we're going to go through and look at these, make sure that we have it set to best practices. And it's probably going to be pretty easy because, you know, as Glenn was noting, we've already gone through and looked at this together. He, excuse me, he and I. But just so that everyone's up to date, and then I can answer any other questions that you might have, Glenn or anyone else. Okay.
okay,
All right. So back to. Let me move this over.
we need to create another template for our Bundaberg and Brisbane jobs to point them to the different server as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's go through that. So that first, excuse me. Getting a sip of coffee. Pardon me. All right. So that first page is just project-specific information. So in the template, we leave most of it blank. Once you create your project, you'll fill most of this in. Confidential. In the template, we won't activate this. Once you create projects, if you have a need to limit who in the office has access to the project, perhaps because it's a highly sensitive project and you need to really restrict who's going to be able to see it, you can turn that to confidential. And what that means is only project team members that are added to it can have access. Now, we also have administrator access. You can start off by putting it on administrator access, add the project team members, prep it, get it ready, and then once you're ready, switch it over to project team access. So that's really the intention of those two settings, is to ultimately just provide that project team the access. Okay? Now, again, in the template, we'll keep it no, and you'll activate that after creating the project. Status. Status is available as archive, opportunity, and active. Those are the defaults. But that status list is a customizable keyword list, and you can go in and create these types. Archive makes projects non-editable in Newforma. Now, it doesn't change all of the files that Newforma points to. Those are on your file server, and so those would have to be turned off via your Active Directory settings. But for the Newforma data, it would then make it read-only if you turn it to archive. They wouldn't be able to create new items in the various activities or transfer files, for example. Opportunity and active are both.
Also take it off the,
Yes?
Sorry, Mark, does that take it off the project list as well?
No, it won't. It'll still be on the project list, and the reason why it's on the project list is so that you can still search it, because you might want to pull information from it potentially, or have questions that come up, but you wouldn't be able to modify it. If you wanted to archive it and make it no longer available, even for searching, you just want to go ahead and turn it to confidential and remove everyone from the project team. Okay, status. So on status, those other two, opportunity and active. Active is, of course, what we do with most projects. So then they're active, functional. Opportunity is really the same as active in terms of functionality. It's that the icon is different, so you can identify marketing opportunities. And again, that's renameable, so you can call it whatever you want. You can even have multiple other types using those three and refer to them as other things. So again, that's one of those customizable keyword lists, but those are the three options available. Phase, type, these type of lists are all customizable keywords, so if it isn't set to how you want, you'd want to go ahead and modify those in your keyword lists. And then, of course, all projects are set as a standard for Australian dollar. Longitude and latitude, you can get that from your site survey or Google Maps. If you enter that, then people will be able to click on the project web page on a button to see the location of the project on Google Maps. And, of course, you'll want to add a project image. That shows up both on the home page within Newforma in your office, but it also shows up on the web page when people log in and have the project open. Graphically, it looks better, and it's just nice because that way people have a visual cue of which project they have open. Okay, any questions on template information? Project information is what that'll be.
No, I think we're good now.
All right. Now, one last thing on it. I've mentioned this, I think, to you, Glenn. When you add this in, it's a small matter, but I'll at least mention it. When you add in your primary company roles, you can add in the company who is the owner of the project. Now, of course, we can't do this in the template, but I'll just choose any company here. And then you choose the role. It's the client role that can then automatically fill in that project site using this drop down, because if you add the site to the client's locations, since they typically own the site, it will then allow you to fill that in just by dropping down project site and selecting that. And that way, for consistency, you can keep that listed under the owner/client for those locations, and it will just automatically fill this in based on that. All right, for project folders, each project points to a specific root folder for your project information. Now that we have to have at least one primary root folder that we point to, okay? But you can have as many secondary root folders as you want in case you have data in other locations, on another file server, etc. Even on an EDMS system, for example, that would then be available for being added into the project. For this root folder, we also have a need to add data in for Newforma, and we have that standardized in your office. So each project has a folder that's added in called Newforma, and within that Newforma folder, we add record copies of certain things that are required to be kept for your office. So the emails are all kept in that Newforma folder. Record copies for all file transfers, including the transmittals, are kept in that Newforma folder under record copies. And then from the mobile apps, when you add data such as photographs out in the field, those files are added into the corresponding punch list media or field notes media folders. Now, IT should be, and I think, Chris, you're probably aware of this and are already doing it, that folder, that Newforma folder, since it is a record copy, and it's important that those files can't be deleted, that users do have read and write access, but they can't modify the folder. So your general users are not able to modify, which means they won't be able to delete any of these. They would have to go to an administrator if they wanted something removed from one of these folders. The email is great, thank you. The email is being saved in subfolders by the date of the email. So for each month, a subfolder is created. And you can add additional subfolders to your filing folders. So using this functionality in your email, Glenn, may I open up your email just for a moment?
Yeah.
All right. Within your Outlook in email, let's go, thank you, you have your items to file folders, okay? So for each one of those projects, it's just drag and drop, and then the standard settings that we turn on is that those emails are then automatically filed into your projects. Now, if you want to, you can also have subfolders. So under any project, not each, but any project, you could have, for example, a folder that's called confidential, or it could be called project managers, or something like that. And then IT, once Newforma creates that folder, let's go back to Newforma. All right, so once you use this function to set up the folder, you just name whatever folder you want here, as many as you want. So I could put confidential. I could put project managers. I could put one for Glenn. Okay, if I created that, all three of those folders would show up automatically in the email folder. And then they would also show up as three separate folders in that items to file folder for this project, okay? But IT would have to go into that folder within the email folder and set the Active Directory settings once Newforma has created it. But it's necessary for Newforma to create it so that it connects through your IMAP functionality for drag and drop. But once that's done, and we would check this box, once that's done, IT, Chris, you can go in and change those Active Directory settings as appropriate, okay?
Okay.
All right. Any questions on any of the project folders?
No, I think it's fine, mate.
All right, excellent. Let's go over to activities. So activities, this is one of the reasons why you'll want to create project admins potentially. So a project admin, because they can come in and control the project settings itself. Now, granted, we're looking at the template settings, but a project admin would be given rights to their project, and it would then say project settings. They open it up, they'd see the same thing for their project settings. Which activities do they need to have on? Now, at this point, we've got the core activities on in active projects. Once we start training other activities, or there's a specific need on a project, we can turn on additional activities. So if you're in design, you don't necessarily need to turn on contract management activities. But when you reach that phase, the project manager would want to be able to go and turn those on. Okay, so those activities are in here, and you just simply drag them over. So if we want to turn on the punch list or RFIs, we would just simply grab one or more activities and just drag those over, and that would then turn them on. All right, but the current template is set so that that's off. So let me turn off, what's it, RFIs and punch list. All right, so it's simply drag from the side to that side in terms of which activities show up in your project home for the project, which activities can be used. Okay?
Can I just ask a question, Mark?
Of course.
If those, let's just say punch list is not actually over in the available activities, does that mean that the mobile apps won't actually see that project?
If the mobile apps you wanted to use punch list, you wouldn't have that option available. So the activities, and that's an excellent question, and I was just about to go over to Info Exchange. So the mobile apps actually depend upon which activities are shared on Info Exchange. So under the Activities tab, it shows the activities that are available here in Project Center when you go to your project home. Okay? And then in addition to that, you can choose which activities are available on InfoExchange. Now you can't share it on InfoExchange if you're not sharing it here within NPC. Okay, so any of these, even if I turn it on in InfoExchange, will actually turn off. So if I take all of the activities here that are hidden, and I move these over, excuse me, and I go ahead and say that they are available on InfoExchange, and I save the settings, I'll go ahead and say OK. All right, so I just saved the settings. It still won't make those available. So I'm going to go back, edit. We'll go back in and edit the settings again. So any activity that's turned off, either in Activities or if it's on in Activities but it's off in InfoExchange, okay, then it won't be accessible using the mobile app. So at the moment, what you have access to with the mobile apps, you have action items available. You have field notes available. The other one that's quite common with those mobile apps are punch lists. So punch list wouldn't be available. And you can create different types within them. So we can have different types of action items, different types of field notes and RFIs. But any types that you wanted under not RFIs, punch list, any of the types that you would want under punch list wouldn't be available. Okay, and then the other thing is record documents. So record documents is available, and that's necessary for the Plans app, so you would have access to that. But if record documents were turned off, you wouldn't have access to those drawings in the Plans app. Does that answer it?
Sure does.
And so go ahead and clarify if I didn't quite answer it.
No, it's all good. You answered fine.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you. All right. So activities, that's pretty straightforward. Those are the ones that are on in NPC. InfoExchange, these are the ones that are on InfoExchange. I do see that we do have here, Glenn, we have conference call, conversations, phone calls on in InfoExchange. Now that's fine because any external user wouldn't see those unless they were on it, but I don't usually actually leave those on. So I don't know, for me, and it's up to you, I usually turn them off just because even if I did make a note of a phone call, which I doubt you do, I don't know anyone that does, frankly, but if by chance you did make a calendar item for a phone call, it would show up on here. So if you want it on, I don't know if that's intentional or not, we can leave it on, but I usually turn off a few of those. I turn off phone call, I turn off conversations, and a contractor meeting I leave on, client meeting is fine. Conference calls, again, calls, I just have an inclination to turn those off from InfoExchange, but that's your call. If you
they can turn off markers. So
yep.
We can always turn them on if we have an urge.
All right, absolutely. So let's just turn them off just for the heck of it. And then once we go through action items, meeting minutes, and project timeline, you'll understand how it's utilized, and you may have a preference to actually turn those on. But for the moment, I'm just going to, site visits, okay. Phone call, phases, phone call, turn off. For some reason, I like to turn the calls off and the conversation. So client meeting, contractor meeting, holidays, definitely want holidays, milestones, phases on site visit. Okay. Conference call, conversation, phone call. All right, terrific. All right. And then those are the rest of the activities that are available. Everything else is off because it's off in our activities. All right. Now let's come back to InfoExchange. We'll come back to admin in a moment. I'm going between the two because activities and InfoExchange are kind of related. All the projects are made available on InfoExchange, so that allows you to send files using InfoExchange and provides access to anyone that you put on the project team and give access to the projects. And then we have your transfer options set to our best practices. So we don't turn that on. That's a global setting, which is turned off. So public file transfers aren't even available on your system. Hide recipients on all transfers and transmittals. No need to turn that on. Now, an administrator might want to come in and turn that on a project when it reaches a tender phase. And that way, no one can make a mistake and accidentally CC a whole list of tenderers when you distribute data to them. So in the tender phase, you might turn that on. That's about the only time, because otherwise, each individual file transfer gives you the option to turn that on. Okay, so you don't have to turn it on globally for the project. Require all external recipients to sign in to receive transfers. You would turn that on in the instance where you have a highly sensitive project and you want to keep it very confidential. And that way, when you send file transfers, users can't use the link in the email notification to download the files. They actually have to log in. Well, they'll have the link, but then they'll have to sign in on InfoExchange in order to download it from the link. And then the rest are turned on. Best practices require user credentials for shared folders. So if somebody sets up synchronization for synchronization, automatic synchronization. So if someone sets up automatic synchronization for a shared folder, they have to put their credentials in. That makes sense. So that each time a synchronization is done, it's done under their name. Require a transmittal on every outgoing InfoExchange transfer. That's good, so that you have that record copy in your system. Require include transmittals in contents instead of email attachments. So that puts the transmittal within the zip file that gets transferred, and it puts it within the zip file in your record copies on your file server. Provide direct download links on incoming transfer notifications. So when someone goes, like a consultant, goes on your InfoExchange site and sends a transfer to you, if you're out of the office, you get the email notification. You still have a link to view it when you're out of the office, not just limited to accessing it in the office. Automatically download incoming transfers. All users will download the transfers that come in anyhow. So what we do is we provide a feature that allows the zip file to transfer from InfoExchange to your record copies automatically, so that they don't spend time downloading large files, for example. So it just speeds the process, and it doesn't increase any security issues, because they're going to end up doing that anyhow. So even if there was, say, a virus that was inadvertently put in by one of your consultants who you give access to InfoExchange, let's say in a Word document, for example, which occurs, in that case, it wouldn't matter. Same protocol occurs. Your system won't see it until it's downloaded, and then it, of course, would be not available to the users based on your virus software. And then allow cloud delivery and automatic downloads on the notifications that are sent out when you send file transfers. They have an option to turn on cloud delivery. So if they want, they can have it automatically delivered to their box, Dropbox, or Google Drive. All right. Any question on any of those transfer options?
No, I think we're right.
All right. Record copies, we're requiring those on all file transfers. So for both issuances out of document control for your record documents, and standard transfers from various activities like RFIs, submittals, and standard file transfers within transmittals or InfoExchange. For shared folders, it's optional, because you won't necessarily always want to require a record copy of a shared folder, particularly if you're synchronizing it frequently. So that most restrictive option is optional. We could choose never, but in some cases you may want to create a record copy of a shared folder, so it is optional. Any questions on any of those?
Nope.
All right. When you do file transfers on InfoExchange, They are self-cleaning. So after 14 days, the default is that it will automatically clean itself off of InfoExchange. You still have your record copy, of course, but that copy that gets posted on InfoExchange for parties to download expires off after 14. Now, individuals can change that when they send the transfer. If they want it to be longer, shorter, or not at all, they have the option to control that, but the default is 14 days. Now, for contract management closing activities, let's say RFIs, approvals, instructions that you send, so EIs or site instructions, I'm not sure which you refer to them as. When you close those items, the final action that occurs on it, which summarizes and gives the final decision regarding each item, it will uncheck the expiration option in the file transfer. Now you can recheck it if you want to, but it unchecks it because the rationale is during construction you want those items available so people can go and view any associated file transfers that were related to an approval. So shop drawings, for example, or some type of cut sheet that was submitted for approval, any documents related to an RFI, etc. So it keeps those available through the project, through construction, for example, on InfoExchange. Okay? Sound good?
Yep.
All right. All right. Any questions on that? Anyone?
No.
All right, excellent.
All seems to be going in.
All right, well, this is going pretty smooth. So Activity Center setup. This is where we configure your various activities for the office. So this is actually pretty important. Now, transmittals, for example, I think we've already gone in. Yep, we knocked it down to 4 digits. So you'll have 9,999 for the numbering sequence. But of course, you can always come in if you do start to get to 10,000. You can always kick that up. But the standard is that instead of 5 digits, it's just we're doing a 4-digit sequence. And then the keyword list that we're utilizing, and can users customize those? So for the global keyword list, they can customize it. Global transmittal purpose list, you can't even customize, put your own value in if you want. It's not even an option in the system, so it can't be turned on. But if you want to lock down certain lists that do allow users to put their own value in, this is where you would come to do it. So if you find any consistency issues on things, let's go to RFIs. For example, in RFIs, people are not being consistent on the reasons list, for example, and you want to lock that down so that people aren't putting in all kinds of different reasons. Then you're able to change that setting. Now I'm getting a note that my audio might be degraded. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's fine at the moment, no?
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. So if I wanted to lock that down so that users can't input their own value, I would go ahead and uncheck that option. And if I wanted to have a specific list that applied just to this project, it wasn't part of my office best practices, it had to vary for the project, I could create a new project specific. It would no longer be global. I'd call it whatever the project is, reasons list, in my keywords. And then I would then reference that for this project. So you have the ability to even modify that on an individual project basis. Okay? So I'll cancel that.
How do you modify that?
So, sorry again?
I think once you get into project settings, you can modify your keyword list anyway, can't you?
Well, the keyword list, so, well, you can, but you'd be doing it globally. And so let me pause on that and let's make sure everyone understands the keywords. So, because keywords are really powerful for settings in general, but most importantly for activities and how those are used, because we can have specific lists for different activities, even though we have a global one. So I could even call this RFI reason list, for example. Okay, even though that's just the global reason list. So let me show you. I'm going to click OK, and we'll save these. And then I'm going to open up. Let me close that for you. All right. So anyone, let's go to licensing just for a moment. So anyone in your office can be made a content administrator. So if I open up Bill and look at his settings, okay, there is this role called content administrator. So global administrators can access keywords here, okay, where I'm pointing up on the screen. So in Project Center administration, global administrators have the best access because they can do some functions that you can't do from outside this console. But a content administrator, they can go into the contact directory, or if they're on their My Projects, they'll have an option to modify keyword lists on the menu, and they'll be able to get into keywords. So it'll show up under form letters actually, modify keyword lists. So it's kind of hidden, but it's easier to just go to your My Project Center and then modify keyword lists will show up. That same option here shows up on your task option. And when you click modify keyword lists, it opens up all of the keywords. And then you can go to that list. So that was called the reason list. So I would then filter down to my reasons. There's my global reasons list. And then I have the ability to select it and modify it. Okay. And so if I don't have the option that's available, or I want to delete an option that we don't use, I can remove it. I can click modify and rename it. And I can even add new ones that don't exist. And that's true of almost every drop-down menu or button that you have within New Forma. It gives you these lists, it's using these lists that you're able to actually customize so that your workflows are really most appropriate. And note that at the top of this, it says RFI. It doesn't have to be alphabetical. You can put it in a sequence of your preference. You can sort it alphabetically when you go to utilize one of these lists typically, but sometimes you can't, and in which case it's nice to have the most common option at the top. Now RFIs is the most common, so it's been put at the top, but I can put it anywhere in the list that I want. If it's not uncommon, I might have it down at the bottom. If owner's request is the norm, that'll be the default when I open it. But that's not true. Since RFIs, it's using it for that, we've got RFIs right at the top. But that list is a global list and would be used in some other activities as well, quite possibly. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, because I see it listed, and I'm just not sure which other ones it may be used in. It's just the generic reasons list. Okay, so that's the nature of those keyword lists. Now, you can add as a content administrator when you're outside of project administration, since you're not a global admin, you can add new lists. But the problem with adding a new list is I have to choose the list type. So if I wanted that reasons list, I'm going to have to go to reasons list, and I'm going to have to start from scratch. And that's not always preferable because that means it has nothing in it. Okay, so I go reasons, and then I would call it project whatever. Okay, and I would click OK. And it would then create that list. Okay, and then I would modify it, but you'll see it'll be empty. So if you don't want to start empty, because there are some lists that you really want to use what's already in it, let me cancel that. Okay, then you're best off coming in or having an administrator come in and add those under keywords, because one of the things an administrator can do is they can select, go to the list just like you can outside. But so if I go to reasons, there's my reasons list. They have the option to select add similar, and that'll duplicate the list. So then I can do the same thing, project X, reasons list, say OK. I didn't have to select what list it is. Okay. Oop, did I hit cancel? I think I did.
Mark, doesn't that create a problem though? That
is it on another? Is that on another?
Just going to ask a question though. Don't you end up then with some projects having reasons that are different to any other one, and we'll never find them when we're searching?
Well, actually, if I go to see all the reasons list that I have, I'm just going to filter to it because I just want to make sure that I clicked cancel. So let me go to reasons, and I'll filter to those. Yeah, I did create it. Did I misspell it? Oh, I misspelled it. But there's my reasons list. So now that I use that add similar, it duplicated it, and I can modify it. Now, this is I'm only showing you this when you want it or have a specific need and for a different keyword list in your system. Now that could be project specific, or it could be that I have a list that's used in many different things and I want to apply it to one activity center only. And that's all. I just wanted to make sure you're familiar with the functionality in general. But no, you definitely don't want to have multiple lists that vary. You want to have consistency and use the global list where appropriate. But in some cases, you may have a need to have that other version. And I'll go ahead and remove that one that I created. All right. Does that make sense? Any questions on it?
No, I think we're right.
All right. All right, let's go back to our settings then. All right, so edit settings. Sorry, I'm being thrown off by my half an hour time difference here. India's strange. They've got that half an hour difference. I know some areas in Australia have that too. It's kind of weird. Makes it hard to keep track of time. All right, so now back to Activity Center setup. So I've given you some understanding on those keyword lists. So for example, with approvals is going to use a number of different global lists. It's using this global submittal action list. Well, that's submittal specific. But then there's a global spec list. Now the spec list can be used for a number of different things. You might want to have a specific list that you only use for submittals. So you could have one, and maybe we call it submittal spec section list, and use the global one for something else in another activity. The global keyword list is used for submittal keywords. You might want to have a set number of keywords that can be added in for your own internal auditing purposes. And other people wouldn't see that necessarily when you send submittals, but you could add that keyword in, and you wanted to create one, for example, instead of the global keyword list, called submittals keyword list. And then you could lock it down, for example, by going in here, choose that submittal keyword list, and then lock it down so that users couldn't add their own value. They would have to choose from that list. So it's just if you have certain procedures, something that you need to track and control, it gives you some functionality to allow that. All right, and each of those activities we can rename most of the contract management activities and select various settings for those activities, control tasks on which are available. So if you only receive submittals or approvals, you can turn off create, so that you can't create outgoing submittals, for example, just to sort of streamline workflow options. And we'll go through that in detail when we go through contract management, but just to sort of give you an overview of what the functionality is within Activity Center setup, because it's consistent. I mean, even for action items, which you're hopefully already using, the same sort of principles apply. You have those keyword lists that apply to it. And then we can create new types. So in the global action item type list, you have certain types already created. And I think we created 3, if I recall correctly, Glenn. We have RFIs, a QA, and one other type I can't quite remember. Do you recall?
I can't either.
Okay. And we would just go to the...
I know we did something.
Yeah, we would just go to the keyword list, and when you open up your action items, you'll see the types that have been created. If you want to create more, you need to go to that action item type list and just add in that new type, because we're prefixing each action item, the numbering with that type. So if it is a QA, I don't know that you called it QA though. I can't remember the term you used.
No, I call it corrective action report.
So it's,
CAR.
yeah, so it was CA, I believe. And we may have done one something for design or something like that. I can't quite recall. And then again, that'll have a prefix as well. And that way those are numbered separately and filterable by that type. Okay. So it just gives us a way to basically customize. I tend to call it configure because we can't fully customize the user interface, but we can customize many of the settings for the different activities. And that becomes particularly important when we will get into contract management and how you manage contract changes. Any questions on any of that? I mean, at this point, in any case? Okay. All right. And timeline's quite similar. I mean, this is basically the activity setup for timeline. When we go through action items, meeting minutes, and project timeline training, you'll, I think, have more appreciation for these settings. We can customize the type of meetings that we can create and track. We can choose whether it shows in the calendar, whether it shows in the journal view, whether it's being logged within your meeting minutes, and default colors, any default keywords, so the basic settings for it. And so it's really the settings that we use to control our meeting minutes. And then lastly, our other keyword lists, other project lists that are used in the project. It gives us a way to control additional lists outside of specific activities that are also used. So whether or not those are locked down and which list, excuse me, is used in the project. And then lastly, down below, define send via and receive via values. This is useful if you have an FTP or you're using AConnects on a project. So contractor or owner has required AConnects on a project, or an FTP or any other drag and drop system. We can add in additional values, and you can use a drag and drop tool that integrates with your transmittals and record copies so that you use the same protocols that you're using for file transfers with Nuforma, even for uploading to those drag and drop sites like an FTP or AConnects. And it'll create a manifest as well, so it helps with uploading data. Okay. All right, so any questions on any of those settings? Timeline, other project lists?
I don't think at this stage, Mark. Once we get into it, there might be some queries, but not at the moment.
All right, excellent. Well, that's the basics of the settings. So we've created that. Now I can export a template from those settings. That would give me a spreadsheet template, and I've shown Glenn how to modify a spreadsheet template and apply specific settings to projects. So we could save that template onto the desktop, edit the fields that show up in that, and since we've gone through that, Glenn, I don't know that there's a need for me to go through that with everyone at this point. What are your feelings regarding that, since we've already gone through that in detail?
Not at this stage. I'm sure the guys some of them love their spreadsheets, so they'll be getting into that.
Okay. Now you also mentioned setting up projects. So we already have the Toowoomba project template. Now I can create a similar template from that. So you mentioned creating additional templates. If I choose that create a similar template, it will then just copy those settings and allow me to create that new template. And within each project, we specify the server that's being used. And I don't think I pointed that out when we went through our settings. So because I kind of take it for granted, but in admin, We missed admin. So let me actually, that's why, because we did activities and info exchange, and then I forgot to go back to admin. So that's pretty important. So let me address admin. That's our last tab then. So on your question, Glenn, about creating new templates, I can create now another template with the same settings that we've already used in Toowoomba, but now when it comes to indicating a different server, we would choose that server. Now I'm only seeing at the present time the RMA and F1 server, but if you have other Project Center servers, you can indicate that server so that it will write to it. So do you only have one Project Center server at the moment on your network?
Yeah, that's all we've got for the moment. We may have another one in Brisbane eventually. We're going to see how it operates without it.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, at that time that you do add it, it would be available in the list, and then we could just specify that that's the Brisbane. For example, you could call it the Brisbane project template, and then that would have that server, and that may be the only difference between the two. But that way you can simply select the appropriate templates when you batch create or even create an individual project from the template. And for consistency, it is always advisable to use the templates to create your projects. It just saves you time and ensures that you're consistent with the settings that we're applying to all the projects. Now, for everyone who hasn't gone through this previously, I want to explain the admin tab. So I mentioned project admin, so this is quite significant. If we want to make someone a project admin, we have to designate them as such. So our template is set so that only global admins are project admins, and they are by default. But we can specify on a project, either when we create the project as part of the template, or after we create the project, we can come in and choose global admins and Project Center users, and that allows us to designate any Project Center user as a global admin. So we can come in then and add individuals to be project admins. And I can go in and I'm just going to do internal users, and I can go ahead and put whoever it is that should be that project admin. Okay, and then those two, Chris and Justin, once I click OK, would then be the project admin in a project that I'm creating, or if I set that here in this template, any project created from this template would make Chris and Justin a project admin as well. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that then allows them to come in and change these settings as needed. All right. Now in the template, we're not turning that on though. We're keeping it to global admin, because if you don't designate someone in that list, then everyone who's on the project team becomes a project admin. Okay. So we leave it off until you actually turn it on and specify the list. All right. The only restriction that we're putting that global administrators, or project administrators, which can include any designated project admin, we're restricting the deletion of items in the projects just to project admins. So someone can't go in and accidentally delete an RFI that someone created, okay, or something of that nature. They can delete their own, or a global admin or project admin rather can come in and delete the item. All right, and we haven't turned on the other restrictions. We have the ability to restrict the modification of the project team, which means people, only a project admin can add someone to the project team, but that's usually not helpful in keeping things flowing. So if you don't need to turn that restriction on, I wouldn't. That also allows the project team members to add someone into your contact directory, the global contact directory. They can create someone new in that. They can't modify existing ones, but they can add a new one if it doesn't exist, and then give them access to Info Exchange to send you files, for example. And it also provides the ability to restrict the modification of timeline items, which I don't usually see that our timeline settings for meeting minutes and project timeline. All right. The other settings on this tab, well, before I go on, any questions on project administration?
No, no.
All right. And then, and I didn't mention, Glenn, I probably mentioned it before, once you do have multiple servers, we can mirror project database information between those servers so that it's fast to access information through Newforma. But that option doesn't exist on the projects until we do have multiple.
Okay.
The template styles, so that we can have custom template styles. We're using your Project Center default, but if at some point we need to create project-specific templates, we can create those template styles. A global admin can create it, and a project admin can then choose it once it's made available for projects. And that relates to your forms, customized reports, things of that nature. The reminders are turned on your projects. Those are set to twice a week for your internal users to get that summary report, and once a week for your external users. If for some reason you wanted to turn it off for a specific project, you could, but you don't typically do that because you can also go into individual users' contact information on the project and disable those reminders from within the individual if you got an individual request to disable it. Project email, we have a couple of things. We have the items to file folders, and the items to file folders are being labeled in your Outlook or on your webmail. If you go to the webmail in your smartphone, you'll see those items to file folders in any of those locations, and it puts the number and then the name. That's the standard that we're using in your office, number and project name. But you have the ability to set that. And then for each project, you also have what's called a project email address. So we've set in your projects by default to provide you with an address where if you CC or even send an email to that address, it will automatically file within your projects. And that name is project name at infoexchange.rmaengineering.com.au. So that's the standard convention. And so for any given project, whatever the project name is, that's the prefix to that extension at infoexchange. Again, let me just show that at infoexchange.rmaeng.com.au. All projects will have that available when they're created using this template. Whoops, no. Let me just scroll this down. So for example, using that convention, the WeWA CSD would be WeWA at infoexchange.rmaeng.com.au. Okay? Any questions on any of that?
No, I've got a small question. On one of these jobs I created, most of them are on our Toowoomba server. One of them is on the Brisbane server, but it doesn't seem to be appearing on my project email mobile app. So this one here, so that one.
Okay.
You have? No, it's not that one, sorry. It's this one here. I can't put, this one here, which is on the Toowoomba thing, I have it. It doesn't appear on the mobile apps at all.
Okay.
Well, I just don't know if there's a setting or something in there that's wrong.
A prerequisite, of course, is that it's got to be shared on InfoExchange, which it is. Okay. And if we go to the activities, of course, the activities have to be available. So the activities project email is available. Okay. And on InfoExchange, of course, project email has to be available. So now wait a minute. What am I? Activities. Info Exchange, it says, there's my settings. Something's weird about this. What am I forgetting here? Activities? Because I'm expecting to see that Activities tab, so something is peculiar about this. Let me look here.
Which one are you trying to get to, Matt?
I'm just picking another one.
Okay.
What's very strange, let me maximize this. Maybe something's hidden on that menu. Yeah, okay, there we go. I just want to see, I had to actually expand that because it was hiding this. So let's see. Email, all right, so we just want to confirm. All right, it's using our template correctly, so there's email, it's available, no issues. So no issues on any of that. So then it really comes down, Glenn, to the user, okay? So that should be available. I'm going to expect, because we applied the template settings in a standard way across all projects. So let's go to Info Exchange just to make sure. There it is. So we can see, but you know what you haven't done? This project isn't made available on Info Exchange. Do you see that?
You clicked that off last time, right?
Did I?
It was clicked on.
All right. I believe you. I think I may have.
We all saw that.
Anyway, this is the one I'm having problems with anyway, Nelson Stage 6.
Nelson Stage 6 was the one? Nelson Stage 6.
Nelson Stage 6 is
Well, let's go in Info Exchange, and there's a way to see this universally. It's on, okay, and there is a way. I mean, we're opening the individual projects, but we can look and see that also here. So if you right-click, if it's not turned on, you can see whether or not Info Exchange is available. So Info Exchange, the various settings that we have. So we can see, and let's just double confirm settings on the project. So let's go over, where do I have that on here? So all of them are turned on for Info Exchange. So that would mean they should. Now let's go to your project home. And then it comes down to, do you have access? Because as you might recall, you need to add it to your My Project. So is that project Nelson Stage 6?
Yep.
All right, so let's open Nelson Stage 6. You need to be on the project team and have Info Exchange access. So you're on the project team. I can see that already. But do you have Info Exchange access? That's the question for me. And you don't.
No.
You don't. See the no? And so you can manage that for one or more users by just right-clicking, change field value, and go down Info Exchange access. And so it's good that you've asked this, because this is one of those things that, you know, you've just got to kind of get used to asking yourself those questions, because it will affect stuff like that, and those questions will come up.
Yeah, put all of it. They all should be yes.
Yeah, and so you can easily change that.
Okay, that's good. That's stopped me from going crazy.
Excellent. And then there is one other setting. So when it does come to those mobile apps, we've attempted to make it simple for you to make sure you're able to give access to the mobile apps. When you go to the project home, if you're an admin, you'll have this set up mobile apps option. And you can click on that, and it'll let you know if you're set up or not, and it'll tell you. So it says the new form of mobile apps do not require any changes to your project settings. The following activities are already enabled and available on Info Exchange. So we have action items, document control, field notes, Info Exchange, project email, project team, and punch list. It is saying that those are available. Now, of course, the activity has to be shared in the project, so if it wasn't turned on, then it wouldn't be available. So punch list is available in this project. Okay. Let me go back. I just want to go back to Project Center for a moment, just make sure I haven't missed anything else that's important. I've gone through with Glenn. We've actually looked at the batch creation as well, so project administrators can batch create those projects for consistency. And Glenn, you've done a great job with that. So that is just coming in and creating, and create project or batch create. So the batch create is usually what I recommend because you can start your work, and then if you need to make modifications to it, you can at any time and come back to it. And then we apply those templates when we batch create. You can create individual projects. We can go create a project. And when creating the individual project, we can still apply that template. So we would choose the template we want to apply and go ahead and then click create. And that's really the use of those templates. Okay. Anything else? Questions?
Well, nothing really. The only thing is, say this job here, the fact that I've pointed it at the
Let me cancel
Brisbane
this.
search.
Let me cancel this. Hold on one sec.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, Glenn.
So this project here, when I created it, I pointed it at the, it's ready for construction for the contract admin guys, but I pointed it at the RMA at 83, which is in the Brisbane office, so that's still okay to use the former template and just point it at that?
It is. It certainly is. Now, I think, whenever you are pointing at a location that's further away, you just have to remember in Toowoomba, when you write to this project for the files, like for record copies and whatnot, you're actually going to be writing those over onto that server. It may be slightly longer at your location. That would be the only difference.
Yeah, that's okay, but it's, during construction it shouldn't be a problem. Okay. I don't think there's anything else. You got anything else you want to go through at this stage, Mark?
Let me just.
You wanted to cover today?
I think that covers it. I mean, that gets us through the project admin settings. We've tied it together with some of the global settings that relate to it, including things like keywords. Those settings on the servers for things like the notifications. Your best practices are being followed. We'd already looked at that, frankly. Both for your global settings and for your project settings. We've gone through creating the templates, both the Excel templates. So let's see, project utilities. We've exported to the templates, to the spreadsheet templates. Sorry, I got a little latency there. Export to spreadsheet templates. So we've gone through that, Glenn, and we opted not to go through that in detail with everyone. It's pretty minor.
I can run through that because they're going to be creating projects anyway.
And then how to create and batch create the projects from the templates. So I think that you're up to snuff.
Okay, Mark, that was good.
All right.
So you'll send a link with the video of this.
I will. I probably won't be able to get to it today, but I will send that out to you from this.
Okay, great.
Okay. And if you have any other follow-up questions, just let me know.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay.